Coming up on this episode of Prop IQ, we look at the costs involved with buying a property. We'll be joined by Amy Andrew from Buy the Rules Conveyancing, who will walk us through the conveyancing process associated with purchasing and settling on the property. Also, we take a deep dive into financing the purchase and how a building and pest inspection can help to give you peace of mind. This is Prop IQ. Hello and welcome to Prop IQ, a show produced by the REIQ about real estate and property. Whether you're working in the industry or if you're a consumer interested in property, this show is for you. I'm Antonia Mercarella, the CEO of the REIQ, and I'm thrilled you've joined me for this series where we take a deep dive into the latest trends, news and insights in the real estate industry. Our last episode was all about a career in real estate. We heard from industry leaders about their career journey. Plus, leading buyer's agent Joanna Boyd spoke to us about why a real estate career can suit you at any stage of your life. Make sure you check out our real estate career episode. It's available to watch on demand at any time. And don't forget, we love hearing from you, so please make plenty of comments and of course, ask us lots of questions. So this episode is all about hidden costs of buying a property. Whether it's your first property purchase or you're looking for a change, buying property is always exciting. You've spent months attending open homes, perhaps putting in multiple offers that have been knocked back, but finally your offer has been accepted. When the contract is signed, the feeling can be quite overwhelming. Even if you've purchased property before, chances are the process will have changed and the ins and outs can take you by surprise. Buying a property is likely to be the most significant acquisition you make in your lifetime, so there's an enormous amount at stake. When buying property, there's a lot to manage and keep on top of. And when it comes to settlement day, you want to make sure that you've done everything you can to ensure that you've got the right property at the right price. To gain some more insight into the process of buying a property, we spoke to two experts in some of the most important steps involved in purchasing a property: finance and building and pest inspections.
My name is Cara Haynes. I'm a mortgage broker with Loan Market. We arrange the finance for people buying a house.
I'm Anthony, I'm from Rapid Building Inspections. I'm the Assistant State Manager for Queensland for Inspections.
My biggest piece of advice for anyone looking to buy a property is firstly checking their credit file to make sure there's no surprises. That can be done free online. Also to make sure that your bank accounts are really in great conduct, so no overdrawn accounts, no dishonours, and making sure that all your direct debits are set up so that credit cards and car loans are all paid on time.
All right, let's get on with the inspection. Building and pest inspection is basically a thorough examination of the property's condition at the time. So what an inspector is there to do is to identify major and minor defects and assess them against the Australian standards of inspections.
So a mortgage broker can give you some really updated information, what sort of incentives, say for first home buyers there are, what sort of deposit you need, interest rates, an idea of repayments.
Some key elements that I believe personally, outside of the inspection and the reports, that are really important to the key role of an inspector is communication, trust.
Once you sign a contract, you need to appoint a whole bunch of specialists to take care of things for you. So your building and pest will go along and do their inspections. Your conveyancer will start doing searches and we'll start speaking with the bank to arrange valuations and any extra paperwork. Speaking with a mortgage broker as soon as possible is a great idea. because ultimately we can tell you how much deposit you'll need or arrange valuations if you need to access equity from your existing property.
What they're looking for, examples of those, is structural items, significant deterioration or damage, termite infestation, all the way down to your maintenance items or issues.
We typically, as brokers, don't charge fees for our service because we get paid by the bank that you're ultimately successful with.
Purchasing a property is probably the most expensive investment that the majority of us realistically will ever make in our lifetime. So if you can go into that as confident, with peace of mind, and have as much information to make that informed decision, that's the end goal for us. We're going in inspecting not just a house, we're going in and inspecting someone's home.
Settlement day is a big day, but a lot of our work's actually already done before that. So if any issues arise, it's going to happen a couple of days before settlement. So hopefully settlement day is just a beautiful day where you're waiting for that phone call to say, hey, come and collect the keys.
So organising yourself to get your property from contract stage to settlement is a challenge, but you can reduce much of the stress by taking steps to identify any structural and pest infestation issues impacting the property and confirming your finance before committing to buying the property. To learn more about this and the conveyancing process more generally, I'm joined by Amy Andrew, paralegal from Buy the Rules Conveyancing. Thanks for joining us, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Amy, the REIQ does recommend getting legal advice when buying a property. So talk to us about at what stage would you recommend a buyer engages a solicitor?
Well, ideally the buyer would be sending the contract through for review by the solicitor before they sign it. So it's at that stage, before they put pen to paper, that they reach out. And that way the solicitor can review the contract and make sure that it adequately addresses any of the concerns or any of the needs of the buyer, and that they do understand what they are signing. It's a legally binding contract, and we want to make sure our buyers know what they're signing.
Of course, it's the most important and significant transaction that most of us will complete in our lifetime. And so, Amy, let's press fast forward. We've signed the contract. What is the next step after that?
So we ask that our buyers send through to us a few things and get a few things underway. It's such an exciting time, but to try and set the pace for the contract, we'll ask that they send us the contract fully signed, and they send the fully signed contract to their broker and lender so that they can progress their finance application. The next one is to arrange some insurance over the property straight away, and then paying the deposit. So reaching out to your agent, give them a call on the phone and verbally confirm those account details that are in the contract, pay a deposit. And the last one at this point is to reach out to a local building and pest inspector and arrange your building and pest inspection.
Okay, that's some good advice there, Amy. And of course, there's a range of information and documentation that you'll need to undertake the conveyancing process. So what sorts of documents do purchasers need to give you, for example, so that you can work out what stamp duty to apply?
Yeah, that's right. So there are a few things that we'll need. Again, the contract that our clients will need to complete our client onboarding forms as well, client engagement forms. They'll also need to complete a verification of identity, which all of our clients need to do. The next one is then to fill out some stamp duty forms that we'll prepare for them. They'll sign them and return them. There are a few different concessions that are available to buyers, and most recently we've had an increase in the threshold for our first home buyers, which is really exciting and hopefully bring a few new buyers to the market. And then the last one at this point is the client authorisation form to allow for transacting in PEXA. And really, we just want to say a big thank you to the agents as well. Buy the Rules is the #1 transactor in PEXA, and that only comes about by working with great agents and brokers to be able to do that a number of transactions.
Yeah, that's great, Amy, and it really talks to how complicated and technical the process can be, which leads me to a really important question because, of course, when we are buying property in Queensland, there are a series of recommended searches that a solicitor will undertake on behalf of their client. It may vary depending on where the property is located, but why are those searches so important and why are they recommended?
Yeah, it's really important that the buyers are doing certain inquiries of the title and the property. And the reason being is that the property will transfer to the buyer. We want to make sure that it's clear title, but also so that your conveyancer and the lawyers can do adjustments of figures and make sure that the buyer's not inheriting any rates or water from the previous owner as well. So there's a few different searches there. And again, the best way to try and mitigate any issues with the searches is to talk to your solicitor before you sign the contract of any concerns you might have with the property, so they can recommend a clause to go in there so that if there are any specific items you want to check, that you've got the ability to do that.
Yeah, and look, I think it's important to understand that those searches will cost money, but ultimately they are really important so that you've got peace of mind when you are buying such a significant asset.
That's right, yeah, and we want to make sure that our buyers know what they're signing, know what they're buying, and that there's no hidden surprises down the track.
Yeah, that's right, and I think what's really important to understand is often people might think about a do-it-yourself option, but we always say that's not wise and you should always use a solicitor because it is quite technical and it's not something you're doing every day.
Absolutely, that's great.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Thanks so much for those great tips and insights.
Thank you.
As we've heard, the buying process is long and very technical in nature, but with the right planning and a good solicitor in your corner, you can avoid pitfalls and minimise your risk. And now it's time to answer your questions. And if you have a question about the costs involved with buying a property, make sure you comment so we can help you out. To give me a hand at the desk for this episode, I'm joined by our very own Chief Operating Officer, Dean Milton. Thanks for joining me, Dean.
Thanks, Antonia. Great to be here.
Great. Now, I understand we've already had some questions submitted. So what have you got for me?
Got some really good questions for this episode. So the first one is, if I change my mind after signing a contract, what are my options for withdrawing from that contract?
Well, this is always an important question. Of course, when we are signing a legally binding document, we must take that seriously. In Queensland, buyers do have statutory cooling off rights. So 5 business days from the time you receive a fully executed copy of the contract. And during that cooling off period, you can withdraw from a contract in writing. But it's important to understand that there is a potential penalty, and that's of course 0.25% of the total purchase price. Now, if your cooling off period has already expired, unless there's another reason that you can withdraw from the contract, you are legally bound, and if you do try to break that contract, it will mean that potentially there are some liability issues associated with that.
That's why it's so important to have all your checks and balances in place.
That's right.
From the start.
Absolutely.
The next question, and it's pretty pertinent given the government incentives around the doubling of the first homeowners grant around a new buying a new property, and also the state opposition's commitment to abolishing stamp duty for first home buyers looking to build or buy a new property.
Yeah.
So the next question relates to, what are the special conditions around buying a new property? Is there anything else that I should consider beyond what I consider for buying an established dwelling?
Yeah, that's a great question, and those incentives will make buying off the plan more attractive, of course. But it's really important to understand that when we're buying an established property versus buying something off the plan, it's a vastly different experience. So the very first thing is, it's critically important that you get legal advice before signing an off the plan contract, because of course you're buying something that doesn't yet exist. It hasn't been constructed, the title to the lot hasn't yet been created, so it's very different. It's also important to understand that your deposit may get tied up for a number of years. There may be delays in the building process, and ultimately with an off the plan contract, potentially the builder or the developer can actually terminate under a provision under the contract. So I don't want to scare people off. There's a lot of benefits associated with buying off the plan, but the number one tip is make sure that you go and see a solicitor who is familiar with off the plan contracts and get some really good sound advice beforehand.
Sounds great. So the next question, it relates to building and pest and special conditions. So beyond building and pests, what other special conditions or due diligence can you perform when you're buying a property?
Well, it's really limitless. We know that finance and pest and building are the most common special conditions, but sometimes you might decide that you want to make an offer or make the contract subject to the sale of your own property. And sometimes you've already got your property under contract, but it hasn't yet settled. So you may make it subject to the settlement of that property. But it might also be other things like you want a little bit of extra time to do some further due diligence on the property, maybe get some special engineering reports done, or potentially getting an architect to take a look at it if you're thinking about developing it. Or if you're buying an apartment or unit, it's always advisable to do some due diligence, to take a look behind the scenes, maybe have a look at the last 2 years worth of meetings, minutes of meetings, just to work out if there are any surprises that might be lurking around the corner.
And the last question before we let you off the hook. So some agents provide a building and pest report as part of the process, provided to the seller, which is then provided to you as you're looking to buy. Should you get your own report in that circumstances, or can you rely on that report that's been provided to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we are seeing that this is becoming more common in Queensland. It can be very advantageous, particularly in an auction situation. It saves the purchaser the trouble and the expense, but it is important to understand that that report has been commissioned by the seller, and therefore you as a buyer can read it and review it, which is valuable, but you may not be able to rely on it at a later date if something in the report is inaccurate. So what you can do is talk to the building and pest inspector provider and ask them if it can be assigned to you. Often it can be, but there will be a fee associated with that. But it's money well spent, because you do want to be able to ultimately, if push comes to shove, be able to go back if something does go wrong with that property and the report was inaccurate, to potentially make a claim against the provider of the report.
Okay, that's all the questions we have.
Terrific, thanks. Some really great questions in there, and thank you for taking the time to submit them. And don't forget, if you've got any other questions or feedback for us, make sure you comment so we can respond. And if you'd like to be part of our Q&A segment or appear on the show, make sure you follow us on social media. And a final reminder, please remember to always seek your own independent legal advice when purchasing a property. Every transaction is unique, so the answers and information we've provided today should only be seen as general advice. You should always seek your own independent legal advice that is tailored to your unique needs and circumstances. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Prop IQ. I hope you found it informative. And please don't forget to share this video with your family, friends and colleagues, because you never know, they might just need a hand to demystify the process of buying, selling or renting. See you next time.